Would you look at that? We started right on the dot, right at 9 o'clock. But anyways, hello everyone. Welcome back to Fandomology, where fandoms collide. Me and Phil are back together, and we are talking once again about the king of shock rock himself, Alice Cooper. So if you didn't see part one, we went over from Pretties for You to From the Inside. So go back and watch that, of course, if you want to get our thoughts on those albums. But this time around, we are talking from Flush the Fashion to Dragon Town. Now, unfortunately, we got just like last time, there's something we got to address right off the bat with Alice Cooper because it pertains very heavily with these first four albums. So, if you remember last time, we talked about how in Alice Cooper's personal life, from about Welcome to My Nightmare to From the Inside, he became a really, really bad alcoholic. In fact, From the Inside was kind of loosely about him checking himself into a asylum to help him beat his drinking problem, which he did, at least for a time. However, around the time that he started making the first album we're about to talk about, he found an all new addiction in smoking crack. And because of that, these first four albums that we're going to be talking about take place in what's known as the blackout period of Alice Cooper, where, by Alice's own words, he remembers next to nothing about these four albums. So, Phil, before we get into the albums, is there anything that you'd like to harp on as far as Alice Cooper's just life in general during this time?
Well, I will put it in a little broader context. Even though this is troubled times for Alice Cooper, most of the bands and musicians, and I'll throw out even artists, those that were big in the 70s, by the time the early 80s hit, and when I mean early 80s, I'll say from 1980 to 84, they're on a decline.
We documented that with Kiss, for example.
Aerosmith is the same time. Kiss, Aerosmith, Alice Cooper, other bands, they kind of survived and thrived. AC/DC never was on the decline, though they did lose their lead singer who passed away.
Yeah.
But they came back with Back in Black, which was a major hit.
Sabbath lost Ozzy in 1978, but came back with Dio and had Heaven and Hell.
And that helped them. That really did help them. And Van Halen really start kicking it into gear at this time. But there was also, you want to call it the British mini invasion again.
The new wave of British heavy metal, as people call
it. In the mid 70s, you would say that the American rock scene kicked it in a high gear. By the end of the 70s and going early 80s, besides like AC/DC, mainly in Van Halen, and you can probably even throw in Rush, everything else was pretty much British bands.
Yeah, and these are bands like Motorhead, Iron Maiden, Saxon, bands like that.
Start making it big at this time. Even though they are an older band, they started in the 70s.
Yeah,
they kicked in there. But like I said, there was very few. Maybe a little bit of ZZ Top there, but really,
if I'm not mistaken,
it was hurting.
If I'm not mistaken, real quick, since you brought up Priest, 1980 was when British Steel came out, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And when you think about it, you want to say, like I said, most of what was big in 74, 75, 76, and 77, just by after 77, I don't care which band you choose, Aerosmith, Kiss, uh Alice Cooper.
Hey,
They're
Leia.
they're on that decline. So,
Yes.
and I'm not saying they don't have a gold. Some don't have gold records, but you have to
Yeah.
remember at this time in the early '80s, gold records are not. Yeah, it's a nice milestone. No, but when it comes to records, unless you're getting a platinum album or more,
Mhm.
your albums are not considered successful. You
Right. I
have
mean,
to have the platinum.
we documented that with Kiss. Like I said, I think if I'm not mistaken, Dynasty was the last one to go platinum of
It
the
went double.
70s
It
line,
went
right?
double platinum, and then you got Unmasked and went gold. But you
Hmm.
have to remember there was no American tour, so that kind of hurt. The
Right. And
Elder
then
didn't go anything, and Creatures it
didn't
didn't
go
go
gold
gold
till
to
later.
1990.
Yep.
But you would say the first album that Kiss came back in on Look
Look
It
it up.
Up, that
Hmm.
was the first one that brought it back to platinum. Now for these other bands like Aerosmith and Alice Cooper, they don't start, even though they do have albums out, they don't start getting back their popularity to like 85, 86.
Right.
So, and in particular, the person we're talking about, Alice Cooper,
Hmm.
there's not a song that I can say from, since we're talking about, we're now in the 80s, from 1980 to 1985, I can't think of a song of Alice Cooper that I can say, I like that song.
I
Just,
tend to agree. Yeah, I definitely tend to agree with that. And here's the thing. These four albums, at least the three of the four, to me, suck. The fourth one is good considering what was going on, but at the same time, I kind of had a bit of a tough time ranking these terribly, knowing what Alice Cooper was going through. So we'll get into those now, starting, of course, with Flush the Fashion, which there's the picture of the album cover right there. Now, what's important to know about these four albums, what they all have in common, aside from being during a time where Alice Cooper was at his absolute lowest personally, these four albums were a great departure from what Alice Cooper had been doing musically, where it was just rock and roll tinged with, of course, shock rock. These four albums, starting with Flush the Fashion, were part of the new wave genre, which, for those that don't know, Phil, what is new wave?
it's hard to describe it. Look, when it comes to this end of the 70s, early 80s, you have disco rise and fall real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Quick as it came, quick as it fall. A negative reaction, destroying anything disco. New
Yes,
wave is like, have you ever heard the Cards?
I have not.
Okay. Uh, I would say the only way to describe it for me is rock music, or even you want to call it heavy metal. There's an attempt by a lot of people that they want to be heavy, but they don't
Mhm.
want to be hard rock heavy metal. Okay.
Right.
Kind
Like,
of like what happened, you're too young for it. What happened with heavy metal in the early 90s dealing with grunge. There was a period of time you couldn't be heavy metal because
oh, I've
grunge had
heard.
taken over. And it wasn't
Yeah.
until mid 90s that the opposite happened. You had to be heavy metal, you couldn't be grunge.
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about that, those two albums later. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
But
was born in '94, so
yeah,
I missed all of
yeah.
that.
So I would say if you ever listen to the Chords, I would say almost you would throw Duran in there. Good band, not a heavy
Mhm.
metal band, but they could rock it out. But
One
their
name
thing,
that I heard thrown around quite a bit with the whole new wave thing was David Bowie. Is that accurate?
Well, no, because David Bowie was more. He was a '70s protege. '80s, he became popular because he was already popular in the '70s. But think of technical efficacy, Black Sabbath. You see how they're not. That's not a heavy metal album.
No, it's
It's got
not.
some heavy stuff to it, but that's more
Yeah.
commercial pop. Kiss Unmasked, more pop than heavy metal.
Mm-hmm.
You could see there was a drive to get away from that, even though the people that stuck with it but weren't big in the '70s, the Van Halens, the
Mm-hmm.
AC/DCs, uh, and Priest took it and went harder. So you had a group
Yeah.
of people that went harder, the ones that were in the middle kind of faded away, and then there's the other part. They were more rock bands than would you would say if there was never a decline, you would say Duran Duran might have went the way of heavy metal.
I
You
could
know,
see
if
that.
things had stayed on, and there's a great loss there because not only at this time there's decline, but there are people like Van Halen, Journey, uh, the Who's technically supposed to be coming to an end
Mm-hmm.
at around this time. Led Zeppelin has definitely done.
Yeah, because John Bonham passed.
Yeah, and then you didn't know at AC/DC because when Bon Scott died, you didn't know what they were going to do, if they
Yeah.
were going to keep on, and if the new singer was going to be great. Turned out to be great, you know.
Exactly.
So it isn't like heavy metal died. It was more new. The older heavy metal got a little complacent, and people went to the Van Halens, and some,
Mm-hmm.
believe it or not, went to Journey. You know, Journey got big at this time, huge.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you did
Um,
have what you call the
Leia earlier mentioned ZZ Top as someone else too,
yeah,
maybe.
but you have to remember ZZ Top was '70s, but they managed to maintain what they had as opposed to like Kiss, Aerosmith, Alice Cooper take the
Right.
decline. And you
Yeah.
have to ask yourself, yeah, Black Sabbath's got Dio. They didn't lose a step with Dio, but
No.
had they not got a Dio, would
They
they
would
have
have.
taken a step back?
Yeah, they would have definitely suffered, if not outright ended, after what happened with Ozzy. But
Mhm.
and I want to point something out too, real quick. The fact that we're talking so much about what all these other bands are doing, at least to me, speaks volumes to just how memorable this album, Flush the Fashion, really is. Because, like we said, with these four Blackout albums, at least three of the four are just not good. And now, granted, this isn't the worst of them, Flush the Fashion, but it's still not good. Like, looking back at my notes here, I gave that one, what was I thinking? I gave it a 7 out of 10 when I first listened to it. But thinking back on it, I'd probably sit more at like a 6.5. The best song on there is the song Pain. And would I spend money on it? I have in my notes I'd say yes, but honestly, I'm going to still say yes, but it's like not a priority.
Well, since it's Alice Cooper we're talking about, we could safely say, and like I said, I consider myself an Alice Cooper fan,
Mm-hmm.
but I will not say I'm a diehard Alice Cooper fan where I have to have every album he did.
Yeah.
Okay. And these particular albums are something I will tell you, even back in the day at Kmart, Gaylord's, whatever department store was going at the time, Ames, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you found these in a bargain bin, I wouldn't even pay the $3.99 for it. I just no, no.
Yeah.
It's just there's not even a hidden gem. And sometimes when people like Alice Cooper got involved in stuff that wasn't good for him,
Mm-hmm.
I just think he didn't care. And the record company has no choice but to accept the record that was given to them. They probably weren't happy with it. But
Right.
sometimes the record company has to accept what they make the deal with just as much as they're dealing with the band that they made the deal with. It's a two-way street. And I could tell you for a fact, Alice Cooper is not firing on all cylinders on any of these albums.
No,
Hence why
he's
you
not.
never hear them. You don't
In
hear them.
fact, I'm going to bring up really something real quick. This is just I'm just bringing this up as an image. I'm not going to play the video, but just to show you just how bad Alice Cooper got. Now, here's the thing. Go back and watch the music video for the song Clones, which I would probably say is second place for me. And you can see the effect that what his addiction has on him at this point, but it gets worse. This is from an interview on The Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder in 1981. Just look at that. And again, we're thankful that Alice Cooper survived that, and he is back in kicking butt and taking names. But
the Alice
seriously,
Cooper is the Alice Cooper that is Welcome to My Nightmare.
School's out.
And then when he comes back, when I consider his comeback with Constrictor in '85, this thing here looks like something that got ran over, drugged up, and was on a street corner somewhere.
Exactly.
I did not like this look for Alice Cooper. It was way bizarre, and I even think Alice Cooper wouldn't say that he would be pretty proud of this. This is just bad. Image-wise, music-wise, everything.
And just as a funny side note, why is it that between that interview we just saw and Ace Frehley's drunken antics, why does Tom Snyder get all the weird interviews?
Well, you have to admit, unless you're a Gene and Paul fan, that Ace Frehley interview was hilarious.
Oh yeah, I loved it, but still,
it was hilarious. And granted, you would say Ace Frehley is an Alice Cooper buddy there. Some of the things he was doing there, look, you can go through from even before, but let's just say 70s wise. You have Tommy Bolin from Deep Purple, drugs, killed him. It killed him, right? Great, he should have had a wonderful career. Didn't happen, all right? Ace Frehley, how he survived his alcohol and drug use, I have no clue. Alice Cooper, I have no clue.
Same with Bill Ward and his heavy drinking.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this from a person that grew up in the 70s and early 80s, and it did go over into the late 80s. Cocaine was very popular, right? Yes, drinking was probably more, but cocaine. And the reason why people were doing cocaine because they kept being told it's not addictive, which was a blatant lie. Yeah. A blatant lie. Whoever was trying to sell the cocaine, that's a nice line to tell people.
Yeah.
But it was destroying not just people in the music industry, it was destroying people in Hollywood.
And here's the thing too. In the music industry, it wasn't just rock and metal. Other genres were getting affected too. Like, for example, the country artist Glenn Campbell, someone that I love and take inspiration from. He got really bad into cocaine in the late 70s and early 80s.
I would say in the 80s, it became more known that sometimes you'd be shocked. Who were the people doing cocaine? I can remember late 80s, the Amish were involved with the Hells Angels selling cocaine. Now, tell me any strange, weird people than that.
That's shocking.
But I would say, especially in the 80s, yes, cocaine was popular. And Barry, I would say the king of the 80s, early 90s. But because of cocaine, like I said, marijuana was a stepping stone as much as people say it ain't bad for you, but it causes it because you know what? There's some people that can stop and say, okay, smoking a cigarette, smoking pot, okay, I can stop there. That's fine. For other people, they can't stop. They got to get something more. So then it
Hmm.
was cocaine. Then it became crack. Now we're in today doing fentanyl, and fentanyl is now there's a new one out there. It's always some people that always have to have more because it doesn't,
Yeah.
you know, 30 years ago, heroin before
Hmm.
fentanyl. It's not saying that it's not still out there, but the popularity of something, and then the next, it's always the next thing. And unfortunately, in the music industry, more so, it was a lot easier to get to stuff. And
Exactly.
a lot of it had to do not because they were making albums ain't an issue, the tours. And that's where a band, even back then, were making most of their money was the tours.
Yeah.
And your road crew were the people that could hook you up with what you need. Your management, Doc McGee had even before he was Kiss, when he was with Motley Crue and Bon Jovi, he had a serious drug problem.
Bob
Yeah,
Ezrin
yeah,
apparently had a drinking problem.
he had a coke problem. And but like I said, I mean, this was the scene you grew up in. And
Hmm.
again, it wasn't just musicians, they're actors now. Uh, some people you would swear, no, that person, no way. And then to
Hmm.
come found out, yes way, that actor had that problem.
Even pro wrestlers in the 80s. I mean,
Yeah.
go back and look at some old Hogan, Macho Man promos, some old Ultimate Warrior promos. Those guys were clearly snorting something.
And there was a lot of hiding. People would say, "Oh, this person, unfortunately, this actor, this artist, this athlete, oh, he had a heart attack."
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying people don't have heart attacks, but it was like, you know what? We don't want their memory to be desecrated. And so the family would try to control the narrative. And how did this person die? Oh, he had a heart attack. You know, wasn't true. Or they maybe did have a heart attack, but it was brought on by drug use. You know,
Yeah.
and Betty Ford Clinic did, late mid 70s into the 80s. Everybody and anybody that was famous went to the Betty Ford Clinic.
Hmm.
So, I know this is a little distraction, but if you're talking Alice Cooper and these Black albums, and you're trying to put it in context in the time it was happening,
Yeah.
Alice Cooper wasn't the only one. You know,
Right.
so there was a big, I would say, when it comes to the music industry, that if I make it big, I'm fine. But then again, if I make it big, I can make a sorry album. No one's care. Just give me the cocaine. I'll be fine.
Right.
And not realizing they're losing money, they're losing fans, they're sinking their career. But in their head and in their mind, they still have people around them. Oh, you're Alice. You're relevant. You're just as good as you were doing Welcome to My
Hmm.
Nightmare. And you can any logical person that's going over his albums. If you see these 4 albums, well, I will be honest, even stretch it. Anything after Welcome to My Nightmare until Constrictor, it's, somebody should have said something.
I
You know?
well here's the thing. Someone did say something, his wife. But
Yeah.
we'll get to that later. So Special Forces is the next album we're going to look at. It was released around the same time as that interview that I showed. In fact, you can see a picture of coked out Alice there. Virginia, by the way, in Messenger said that Alice in that interview looked like if someone ordered Beetlejuice off Wish, which again, we laugh at it, but again, this was a dark period in Alice's career, and we're thankful that he survived it and got clean. But this album, here's the thing: from Flush the Fashion to Zipper Catches Skin, the albums just get progressively worse and worse, and you can see the progression of just how much deeper Alice is getting into the addiction. And again, the more and more that these albums go on and the more and deeper he gets into it, the less and less it sounds like coherent music, because it's just not. Like, according to my notes, I gave this album a 5 out of 10, and I would not spend money on it. Best song on it was the opener, just kind of by default. Who do you think we are?
I will tell you for me, and I hate putting it all in a nutshell, but from even before, but since we're talking from 1980 to, let's say, 1984,
Mm-hmm.
anything Alice Cooper released in this 4 years and even before, I don't see a hit. I don't see a gem. I would say it's a waste of time. And I said that back then, and I'm saying that here it is almost what, 40 some years later.
Yeah.
Uh, Look, unless you're a die-hard Alice Cooper fan, that you got to have every album he made.
Or
And
if you're like me and you've got to hear everything for the first time,
it's not worth it.
yeah.
And I'm sorry, it's just garbage. And like I said, it isn't just his music; it's his look, his attitude. Like I said, he's darn lucky. First, that he's still alive. Second,
Yes.
that
In as
his
good a
wife,
health as he's in, too.
actually put up with it. But let's be honest, there's a lot of musicians, and since it's mainly here about music, a lot of musicians' wives in the 70s and early 80s, and even past that, they didn't stick around because they're too drugged up, and you when you first see your person that you like, let's say you're a woman, you like Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
It's not what you would have seen if you were saying you were watching a video, Welcome to My Nightmare. You
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, I like this guy. Maybe if I met him in real life, there's something could be there. Well, when you do that, sometimes you don't know what you're getting. And
It's
like I said, his wife, I give him more than anybody in heavy metal. And I'm going to put that in the genre of heavy metal.
mm-hmm.
Wife that actually saved and did something for their husband. I'm not belittling Wendy Dio. I'm not belittling Shannon Osborne or anybody else. But
Mm-hmm.
Alice Cooper's wife went above and beyond.
Yes.
You know,
And here's the thing too. Not only are we lucky that he is still alive, but he's in as good a health as he's in.
it's a miracle that he is in good health because, like I said, years later, look, when you're in your 20s, your 30s, or even in your 40s, the stuff you're doing to your body, you're like, yeah, I'm young and I ain't never had to worry about it. Some
Yeah.
of these people that you hear in the news, musicians that die 50 and 60 years old,
Mm-hmm.
is not because they're still doing drugs, but it's the after effect years later, the damage you do. When you drink alcohol, you're damaging your liver. Now,
Right.
everybody's different. Your body and your liver might be able to tolerate heavy drinking more than the next person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But some people, do heavy drinking every day that you're blacking out and don't know your name, and you're doing
Mm-hmm.
it for like 5, 10 years. Yeah, talk to me when you're 60 and how's your liver's doing.
Mm-hmm.
It, I
So
I always come from the philosophy you have to be careful what you put in because what you put in isn't going to come out.
right. So yeah, pretty much like I said, special forces, as I said, If you're like me and you want to get into Alice Cooper for the first time and you want to hear everything, listen to it, but lower your expectations and don't go back. Just listen to it the one time and be done with it. And I would say the same thing, especially for the next album we're going to talk about, Zipper Catches Skin. Okay, number one, this is how you know just how bad of an addict Alice was at this point. Because number one, what the heck kind of title is Zipper Catches Skin? And number two, what the heck kind of cover art is that?
I have to question Warner Brothers, who was the record label at the time with Alice Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
Now, pretty much they're riding on the coattails of Welcome to My Nightmare, $1 Billion Babies. Okay.
Right.
But as further ways you're getting away from it, the record company's got to say, and forget about a gold record in Canada. A gold record in Canada is selling 50,000.
Yes.
So that's not really a gold record. Nice little award, but no. You're not making a gold record. You're not selling 500,000 copies in the United States. And here you are, the record company, and okay, this is how it's set up. You put a record. You hope your record, some of the 2 or 3 songs get airplay on the radio.
Yeah.
By the time you put out the first single, you're going on tour for 9 months to a year. All right. Now, the record company, you, and whoever's promoting the tour, they're looking for, you don't have to sell out shows, but a majority sell out 3/4. And that's what they're looking for. I doubt that Alice Cooper at this time is selling out or even getting half the stadium filled up. Okay. And at this time, a stadium might hold 12,000 people, not like today, where it's almost 15 to 20.
Well, since you're bringing up tours, it's worth noting, too, Alice Cooper stopped touring entirely after Special Forces because his addiction got that bad. So Zipper Catches Skin and Dada, the next one, he didn't tour for at all.
And I will tell you this, Paul, and I've said this before with Kiss when they failed to tour in the United States for Unmasked.
Mm-hmm.
That record went gold, okay, in the United States. And remember, Kiss only did one show in the United States. I do believe,
to introduce Eric Carr.
Yes, I do believe had they toured the United States for Unmasked, I would say it probably would have made platinum or got close. When a band like Kiss skips the United States, it's going to hurt you. When they knew their record flop with Unmasked, they didn't tour at all for that. So now you're going 2 years with no tour in the United States. And then you try to put a Creatures of the Night, which is one of their best albums.
Oh yeah, easy.
But
10 out of 10.
Already you damaged your fandom. So as great as Creatures of the Night is, you're not surprised they weren't even able to sell half of a stadium out.
Yeah.
And this will affect other bands. It was very important, and not as much in the 90s. You could probably put an album out and not tour and get away with it. But definitely in the 70s and the 80s, you had to tour to promote that album. So an album that probably would have went gold would probably, if you didn't tour, probably would have made platinum if you toured. And then on the other hand, if you never toured at all, it's going to have an effect on the people that are your fans, that your next album is going to bite you, no matter how great the album is. Touring was important, not just for the band to make money, because you have to remember, a band or any musician or artist, what you make on a record is pennies. I don't care if it sold 12 million copies. A band is not making their money on the record deal. Bands make their money like they do today. Touring is what makes their money. So when you hurt yourself with the touring, you're damaging not just you, you're not just damaging your record, which affects your reputation, and it affects your record company.
Exactly.
And Alice Cooper really bites it. Other bands, Kiss managed to do a turnaround, but
Hmm.
they had to pay a price. Aerosmith is paying a price.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people that said, "Hey, I've been doing this for 10 years. I can put a so-so album out." Well, that's not the case. If your album isn't that good, your fandom is going to get hurt, and that's number one. And number two, some of the people that, let's say you have 1 million fans, but you have maybe another 500,000 that you would call so-so fans. They
They
like
could
this
take it or
album,
leave
don't
it.
like that. Well, if your album isn't that great and you're damaging your 1 million true diehards, but you're also losing maybe more than half of that 500,000 that might also like your album or would have been if it was good. So now you're going from a platinum to maybe double platinum status to gold, and sometimes like an Alice Cooper, not even gold. You hurt yourself. And he did, let's be honest, these 4 albums, but the 2 before it were just as bad. Swing and a miss every 6 albums. That it's a miracle that Warner Brothers didn't cut them after his 3rd album.
Right.
I'm talking
Which,
these bad albums.
of course.
So
So,
sorry if I rambled there.
no, it's fine. Basically, moral of the story, guys, as Phil said, be careful what you put in your body. It may make you make a zipper catches skin or a special forces or a flush the fashion, something like that. But yeah, this album is, in my opinion, the single worst of Alice's career. I give it a 4 out of 10, and all of the songs suck. I cannot pick a best song, and absolutely not. In fact, I'll put it this way. The only reason it's getting a 4 out of 10 instead of lower is, number one, I'm admittedly giving Alice a sympathy point for just how bad in the addiction that he was, because obviously he wasn't in his right mind. But number two, the backing band does a decent job, even though, according to rumors, they were also taking hits off Alice's crack pipe in the studio. But yeah, 4 out of 10. Skip this album.
It tends to one person. I don't care if he's the main image of the band. Well, in this case, by this time, it's Alice Cooper, the man backup
Yep.
band.
Mm-hmm.
But no matter what, I mean, look at Motley Crue, for example. All 4 were doing it. Very few times do you get a band where 1 or even 2, Kiss is the exception with Stanley and Simmons, who that was one of their issues. Understandably, was they didn't go that route.
Yeah.
And sadly to say, there's a lot of people that the entire band was. Everybody has, I guess you can say, a weakness. So I'll leave it at that.
So yeah, with that though, we're going to go ahead, and here's the thing. Everyone at some point hits rock bottom. And Alice's rock bottom and his moment of, oh God, I've got to do something about this, came out in 1983 alongside the record Dada. Now, first off, just take a minute and again look at that cover art. That's actually really cool cover art. It's a Salvador Dali painting who was a close friend of Alice Cooper. In fact, we didn't mention last time just how good of a friend Alice Cooper was with Salvador Dali, because there's footage of this weird like little press junket thing with Alice and Salvador Dali together, where Salvador Dali was just praising Alice Cooper as the best thing to happen to music. But this album is basically Alice's rock bottom and realization of what's gone wrong. Because this album, unlike the last four, yes, counting from the inside, has Bob Ezrin and Dick Wagner coming back. And yes, Bob Ezrin had his own problems. He was a heavy drinker by this time. But I want to.
And Paul, he had a cocaine problem.
Right.
uh,
So, yeah, Bob Ezrin was an addict in his own ways. But here's the thing, I actually really like this album because, number one, it seems way more focused because it is indeed a concept album, more so than the other three were.
it
And
was
number
an
two,
attempt to get him back. And
right.
obviously, maybe not everybody was clean at this time, but I would say Dada. Uh, yeah. Even though I do not like the album, I would say after $1 Billion Babies and Welcome to My Nightmare, it's not a gem, but it has a shining moment. Even though I would not still buy the album, I would say it's the best thing he's done since Welcome to My Nightmare.
I'm gonna slightly disagree with you on that one. I
Mhm.
do agree. I think it's the best that he had done since $1 Billion Babies. Because remember, I wasn't as big a fan of Welcome to My Nightmare. But anyways, I do think it is the best one that he had done since. And in fact, I'll go ahead and say it. My score of it is a 9 out of 10. I would spend money on it. And to me, the best song is the closer, Pass the Gun Around, because there's this one line that I think he put in there because he was fully aware of how sad a state his life was at this point. Something about how I've had so many blackout nights, I can't take it anymore. Now, another thing that happened around this time that this album came out was his wife and daughter left him to go live in Chicago because his wife, just by her own words, got tired of seeing Alice slowly die in front of her to the addiction, and she didn't want to have their daughter exposed to that. And that was like the final wake up call for Alice to get himself straight. So again, he did not.
We should re-mention, Paul, that his wife was there on tour since
Mhm.
even before they got married.
She was one of
Okay.
the dancers that got hired
So,
as part
and
of the Welcome to My
yeah,
Nightmare show.
and she was part of the show. So it isn't like she's, hey, mom, you have a child now, stay home. No, Alice Cooper and his wife took their child, and he took her on tour, still
Yes.
doing her job. So you have to remember, it isn't like she's staying at home and then just Alice is on a 4-month tour, break, come home, go for another 5 months, break, come home. She's out on the road with him and seeing it, you know.
Yes.
So that's very that's a different slice of cake. That's the best way I could describe it. As different as here she is at home. Oh my God, what's my husband doing while she's on the road? No, she's seeing it every day, every night.
Mhm.
And you would have to admit, though, depends on person, how a person feels. How long do you stick with the person before it really
Right.
starts affecting you? At a point, you have to sink or swim.
And
And
then
I
and
think the
again,
wake up call was her her taking their daughter and saying, "This is not the environment I want to be in, or our child to be in." And
right.
Alice Cooper needed that shock.
Agreed. Also, hello Trent. He says, "I prefer vanilla with whipped icing. That's great cake." I don't I don't know what that has to do with Alice Cooper, but again, welcome. Thank you for joining. So basically, this album, Dada, again, Alice Cooper did not tour on it. In fact, after he released it, he quit on the music scene in general and went back home to live with his parents, where for the next from 1983 to 1986, he focused on breaking all of his addictions, and he went back to church and rededicated his life to God. And he, of course, reconnected with his wife and his daughter, and he has been clean ever since. And again, we said it already. It is a miracle that he is still alive today because of all of this and still in as good of a health as he's in. Because this, what he had been going through in the early 80s, nearly could have killed him.
Thank God his dad was a preacher.
Mm-hmm.
I would, sometimes that can be good and bad, but I would say majority good. I think his own father, I would lean more. I would say everybody had a part, but Alice
Mm-hmm.
Cooper's dad being a preacher played a large part because he
I
didn't
will
just need to save his body. He really needed to save his soul.
agreed, but I am gonna add one. I am gonna caveat that with one thing. His dad may have been the biggest influence on him as far as a person, but of course, the biggest influence on him is God.
Yep. And he wouldn't be here today, I can say, with everything that he done, if the big guy wasn't looking out for him. He's got to
I
had the big guy
agree.
looking out for him. So
I agree. In fact, I'm gonna just really quick throw this in there. Everyone is, of course, entitled to believe what they believe. But if you're someone that has been considering giving your life over to Christ, but has been hesitant, saying, I couldn't do that, you know, the sins that I've committed, God would never forgive those. I mean, we're talking about an artist here that was that like got so deep into drugs and all that stuff. And yet here he is today, a committed Christian. And I do believe that God has had a hand in preserving his health as it is. So I would say take that as an example. But, anyways, with that little soapbox moment out of the way, we're going to go ahead and fast forward now to 1986 and Constrictor. And I'm just going to say it right out of the gate. This album is a perfect 10 out of 10. And the star of this album isn't actually Alice. I mean, Alice is great on this album. He is better than he's been since, again, Billion Dollar Babies. But at least to me, as a guitar player, the real star of this album, Kane Roberts.
he was let's say, Mr. Roberts, a great songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
He put Alice Cooper, excuse me, back on the map.
Yes.
Does not get the notoriety that he should have, but especially this album and the next, he brought Alice Cooper back. Alice Cooper, the look, the image, the feel. This is
Mm-hmm.
Alice Cooper. Uh, it's like that period in time from Welcome to My Nightmare to this album is like that gap in there. That's not
Mm-hmm.
Alice Cooper. That's not Alice Cooper. This
Right.
is Alice Cooper. And let's just say a lot of chances were taken. I think he was at this time, he's not with Warner Brothers, he's with Epic,
Yeah.
their new record company. Uh, he has totally new people around him. And let's say finding that he was coming back, the people that were making the movie, I'm not sure which Friday the 13th it was,
Friday the 13th, 6, I want to say.
and this the movie was a hit. This the track that he
Mm-hmm.
does He's Back, Perfect. It
Agreed.
put Alice Cooper back on the map. Uh,
So for me, like I said, this album, I already said it, it is a perfect 10 out of 10. In fact, if you want to, in my opinion, if you've never heard Alice Cooper before and you're interested more in his heavier stuff, you're not quite interested in his 70s stuff, start at Constrictor. But I agree with you, Phil. He's Back is an amazing song, but it only takes second place for me. For me, the best song on the album is The World Needs Guts. Again, because Kane Roberts, that is, in my opinion, his best guitar solo out of both of the albums that he's part of. And so, would I spend money on it? Absolutely.
I would say for me the hidden gem on this album is Teenage Frankenstein. I love that song. I love that song even when the album came out. Uh, I do love. I do think He's Back is perfect,
Hmm.
but I would say the hidden gem is Teenage Frankenstein, and he still does that every once in a while on his when he goes on tour. So that
Right.
tells you how uh, he feels about it. Like I said, I mean, Kane Roberts, and then when we'll go into the next album,
Which is this one, Raise Your
Raise
Fist
Your
and
Fist
Yell.
and Yell, which I do love. I love this album. Uh, this is where you get Kip Winger playing bass, aka from the band Winger.
Yep.
Uh,
So
this is like part one and part two.
I
Raise
agree.
Your Fist.
And and I also ranked Raise Your Fist and Yell also a 10 out of 10. However, if I had to pick one or the other, Constrictor versus Raise Your Fist, I would probably err toward Constrictor,
Mhm.
because while Constrictor as a whole may not be as heavy as Raise Your Fist and Yell, in my opinion at least, Constrictor had the better song. So really it's just, which one do you like more? Do you want the better, more anthemic songs, or do you want the raw heaviness? Because either one is a viable choice. So which one would you, if you had to pick one, Phil, between Constrictor and Raise Your Fist, which one would you go for?
That's a tough one. I would lean more to Raise Your Fist and Yell. There's
Okay.
a lot of anthems that I can remember back at this time that don't get me wrong, I wouldn't even put rate it like an 8 or 9. I would rate it like Constrictor is like a 9, and this is for me a 9.5. They're very close, but when I hear that song Freedom, uh, uh, Prince of Darkness, I love that. I love that song, and Roses on White Lace. But I am a big fan even of Gale, and to me, this is reminiscing of Welcome to My Nightmare, just album, but just a little bit more heavier.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, you mentioned Prince of Darkness and Roses on White Lace. Those two are tied for me for best song, but Freedom to me is a good second place behind those. This one was really close for me. And again, would I spend money on it? Absolutely. This is these these two albums are, they're perfect. Granted, each has their own individual strengths and weaknesses, but taken as the whole, these are like almost mandatory metal listens to me. So if you have not listened to these, just please go listen to them. You will not be disappointed. Now, with that, let's move on to the next album, Trash. This one came out in 89. So Constrictor came out in 86. Raise Your Fist and Yell came out in 87. This one came out in 89. And unfortunately, a lot of the band that recorded on Constrictor and Raise Your Fist left, including Kane Roberts. And because of that,
He wasn't as he might have been. some of the demos, and he might have helped out uh, with some of the songwriting. I don't think so, but don't hold me to that. But he was out before the album was completed,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't nothing personal with Kane Roberts and Kip Winger. Both wasn't had nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
Just that
Let's hear.
as we go on, we'll discover Alice Cooper has a touring band, and though he
Yeah.
loves and takes care of his touring band, whenever they decide to do something else, they're free to go.
Right.
All right, and we'll see King Roberts later on come back.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that what happens sometimes with somebody like an Alice Cooper and a touring band. Uh, if they're there 2 or 3 years, that's great. If they're not, it's not. And it's not unheard of in certain circumstances to see these people come back.
It's kind of like when Dio would switch around guitarists all the
Yeah,
time. He had Vivian Campbell and Doug
uh,
Aldrich, just to
Craig
name a few.
Goody, and a lot of times Craig Goody couldn't be there, so that's why Doug Aldrich got the slot.
Right.
Again, it's there. You have to understand, it isn't anymore Alice Cooper, the band. There's Alice Cooper, the man, and a touring band. They might call
Right.
themselves the Alice Cooper Band, but really they're just look. It's a bass player mid tour decides he's going to do something else. Alice Cooper
They'll
don't
get
have a problem with it. Go
they'll
ahead
get
and do
someone
what you
else.
do. But when it comes to Trash, and I love Trash, it's a great album. Probably up there all the way. I would put it darn near to Welcome to My Nightmare.
Oh yeah, it's
They,
it's a top 10 for me for sure.
he got a lot of help because Epic Records, it was good with Constrictor, was great with Raise Your Fist.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted Alice Cooper back. So when you go in here and you look at his album and you'll see, ooh, Dosman Child. Dosman Child, who wrote with Kiss, Bon Jovi, and
Yeah.
others to help make hits. Well, he makes one of the biggest hits with Alice Cooper, Poison.
Yeah.
You have Joan Jett that helps him write a song, which is just as good, House of Fire.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then Kane Roberts, the one he's credited with the very known artists that write, Desmond Child and Dionne Warren, who also she writes with Kiss too, made Bed of Nails.
Which, real quick, I want to mention, you mentioned Poison and Bed of Nails.
Mhm.
Those are my two picks. Again, a tie for best song. But I
I
do want to mention before you go on,
Go ahead, go ahead.
as great as this album is, I could only rank it a 9.5 out of 10, which is still amazing. But it loses that half a point because Kane Roberts does not record the solos on this album. Another guy named Al Pitrelli does, which again, he's great. If he's good enough for Trans-Siberian Orchestra and Megadeth, he's good, but he's not Kane Roberts. And I
Well,
like Kane
you
Roberts.
do have a bunch of guitar players. Kane Roberts is credited on track 6.
Mm-hmm.
You have Richie Sambora, which is not a slouch of a guitar player, on track
Oh
9.
no.
You have Joe Perry from Aerosmith
Mm-hmm.
on track 3, so that's House of Fire. So that's Aerosmith's guitarist. Uh, so he even gets people guesting to do drums. He has the Aerosmith drummer, Joe Kramer,
Mm-hmm.
and the bass player from Aerosmith. You have Bon Jovi. He even has Steven Tyler singing in the background. This is what you would call I would say a tribute album, but Alice Cooper is doing his job in the album.
Right.
So look, for me, this is his best album that he did since Welcome to My Nightmare. And I would put this up there as, yes, his probably his second best album of all time, if not just for Poison and House of Fire. Yeah.
I'll definitely agree with that. I don't know if second best of all time. I'll have to think on that a little bit, but it's definitely top 10, possibly top 5 for me. So with that, the next album we're going to talk about is Hey Stupid, that
I
came
love
out
this
in
album.
1991. And real quick, can we both agree that that skull with the eyes and the makeup, that looks like Ahmed the Dead Terrorist from Jeff Dunham?
I would say this is even as great as Constrictor and Raise My Fists are like back to back good punches here. Uh, Trash and Hey Stupid is his best in a long time of back to back Alice Cooper albums. And again,
Yes.
this album has a lot of guests on it.
Some
A lot.
huge names too, like
Steve Vai,
Ozzy,
Joe Satriani, Vinnie
Ozzy.
Moore, Ozzy, Nikki Sixx, McMars,
Mhm.
uh, Jim Vance, who is a drummer who you will find out does a lot of ghost work, did with Kiss.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Uh, this album, I would say, as them four albums, it's technically six if you go into the last two in the 70s, as bad as they were, as bad as they were, you go
Mhm.
from Constrictor to Hey Stupid. These are, even if you're not a diehard but just a Alice Cooper general fan, these four albums you should have. You should have these four albums. In particular, I would still say the last two more so, but I still like, I put Constrictor and Raise Your Fist just as good as these albums. The reason I give them a little bit more for the Constrictor and the Freedom as opposed to Trash and the Hey Stupid,
Mhm.
he's going outside to get the work
Right.
done, as
Right.
opposed to when he did Constrictor and uh,
Raise your
Freedom.
fist.
He had his band, he kept it there, which is not a
Right.
bad thing, and this is not a bad thing. Just I would lean more to, could he have done the same with his own, just keeping it within his band as opposed to having all these guests. That's
I
the difference.
that is a fair debate. Um but yeah, for me, Hey Stupid, it is an amazing album. However, for me, I only give it an 8 out of 10 because again, no Kane Roberts, and it starts to lose some of the heaviness and venture more into hard rock, almost grunge territory for me. Because again, 91, this is when Nirvana starts getting popular and grunge really starts taking off, and hair metal starts getting boring to the general public. And I think Alice kind of saw that. And he's like, okay, let me start pivoting in this way a little bit. And while, at least to me, Last Temptation, which is the next album, is very much grunge but heavier, Hey Stupid to me is where that turn away from what he had been doing with the last three albums kind of begins. But it's still an amazing album. My favorite off of it is Might As Well Be on Mars. And would I spend money on it? Yes.
I would
So,
say for me, I do love Hey Stupid,
mhm.
but I do like Feed My Frankenstein. But I would tell you this, to me, not that this could be a bad thing, but if that's not a throwaway Motley Crue track that belonged on Dr. Feelgood,
Feed My Frankenstein?
yes, Feed My Frankenstein.
Hmm.
Especially when you see the players on it. But if you listen to, I don't know if you ever heard the Motley Crue Dr. Feelgood album.
I've only heard one song,
Okay.
Kickstart My Heart.
Whenever you get a chance and you do listen to that, go and listen right afterwards. Feed My Frankenstein. That is like, it's not a bad thing, But to me, that ain't a track that should have been on Dr. Feelgood and sounds like a Dr. Feelgood song. Yeah, good song. Don't get me wrong, but
Right.
I do like Hey Stupid. Uh,
I
there's a couple.
do.
Might Wells Be on Mars is a gem. I
Mhm.
do love that song. After if you take Hey Stupid and Feed My Frankenstein off this album, that will be my favorite song right there. Might as well be on Mars. That it's a long track. It's over 7 minutes, but I love that song.
I do want to highlight one other song though from this album, and that's the closer, Wind Up Toy, because that one is kind of a tie-in to Welcome to My Nightmare, because
Mm-hmm.
again, the character Steven is
Yes,
mentioned.
I would totally agree with you, and I would tell you this: as much as I like Constrictor and Freedom, the tracks on Trash and Hey Stupid, I can listen to that album in the entirety, both of them,
Mhm.
and not feel bored. Not feel bored. Like I said,
That's how
there's
I
some
feel about Constrictor.
yeah. I think there's some songs on there. Like I said, might as well be on Mars. If Hey Stupid and Feed My Frankenstein wasn't there, I could see that being the title track, a
Mhm.
single. So, but like I said, for me, going from this album and the next two,
Yeah,
Alice Cooper
so
is definitely taking a step back. I would have liked to see him kept on going with the style of Trash and Hey Stupid.
I agree, but then again, what we get here is interesting in its own right. So this is the next album we're talking about, The Last Temptation. This is another concept album. This one released in 94, and by this point of course grunge was in full swing, if not starting to go into the tail end of it, because if I'm not mistaken, okay, let me just google this real quick so that I have my facts right. Okay, so I just googled Kurt Cobain, arguably the founder of grunge itself, died on April 5th, 1994. And I'm just googling also when the exact dates of this album.
July 12th, 1994. Released when it was released.
Right.
Yeah.
So definitely Alice took that grunge sound, made it heavier, and applied that to Last Temptation. It's not exactly my cup of tea, but I can recognize that it's very well done. But the story of this one, from what I've gathered, and again, we know that I am not the most reliable source when it comes to concept albums. Like I said, Welcome to My Nightmare went right over my head. But I think I get this one. It's basically about a boy that's enticed by this strange circus that turns out to be run by the devil, but he hears and accepts the calling of Christ and is able to break away from that. Is that about the gist of it?
I would agree. Uh, I won't say it's a perfect concept album because there's a couple tracks there that doesn't have anything to do with the concept. But that's how Alice Cooper does it. Sometimes some of the songs on his concept, like even on Welcome to My Nightmare, there's a couple of songs you're like, is this part of the story? You know,
Yeah. So
I'll be honest, even though I had high hopes because Chris Cornell Soundgarden's on here helping out. Uh, I'm it's not for me. Unfortunately, this is an album. Now it's not as bad as them 6 albums in
oh, not
between,
even close.
but it's just not for me. I wish, like I said, I wished it was more. Like, if this had been something close to "Hey Stupid" or "Trash," I would have been more inclined to say, yeah. But you know, for whatever reason, these artists they want to stretch out and
Hmm. Which I get it. You know,
yeah.
you wanna expand your
But
horizons. You want
like I said,
to acquire new skill sets. That's what
I
I
will
do.
not put myself as a die-hard Alice Cooper. I am a Alice Cooper fan. I love a lot of Alice Coopers, but this is an album I don't have, and I don't want to add to my Alice Cooper collection. I
Okay.
did buy it when it first came out, and I'll be honest, a month afterwards, I took it back. I traded it in towards another new album.
Okay.
It just was not for me.
Gotcha. So my score for it is a 7 out of 10. Best song on it for me is Lost in America. And would I spend money on it? Yes, but it's not a priority. Not even close to as bad as the 3 of the 4 Blackout albums, but it's not as worst, but it's far from his best. I'll put it that way. But with that, it's important to know also that Alice Cooper his sound gets even heavier on the next album, because when you kind of alluded to it already, Phil, for a while everyone wanted to be grunge. But when grunge stopped being cool, heavy metal came back, and it came back in a very heavy way in the form of industrial metal that was spearheaded, at least from what I've gathered, and I am by no means a industrial metal expert. But from what I've gathered, there's two people that really spearheaded the industrial metal movement. Number one being Rob Zombie, whom Alice Cooper has collaborated with, and the other guy, Marilyn Manson, who basically is Alice Cooper's younger evil twin brother. Is that about accurate?
Pretty much. Pretty much. Let's just say he fashioned himself.
Yes.
Uh,
And so Alice Cooper saw what those two guys were doing and decided he wanted to get in on that. And he around this time also, you got to mention he was very vocal about the fact that Marilyn Manson was like openly declaring himself, for lack of a better word, a Satanist. Again, I don't know what it was he was doing. I'm not knowledgeable at all on Marilyn Manson. All I know is that Alice Cooper was very, very critical of what Marilyn Manson's message was. And Alice Cooper decided he wanted to do it, and he came up with Brutal Planet. This album and the next one, Dragontown, are the two darkest Alice Cooper albums, at least up to this point in the retrospective. Because this one, Brutal Planet, all of the songs, I wouldn't call it a concept album, but all of the songs seem to be set on this post apocalyptic, borderline cyberpunk version of Earth. Like, in the theater that is my mind, I imagine like these songs set in a world where all the nukes have gone off and technology has progressed to a scary degree. And Alice Cooper sells that idea really well with this album.
I will tell you that if I could have skipped over, I know we skipped over what is the name of that album? The I call it a greatest hits album. They call it Fistful of Alice.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if I would say he never did Last Temptation, this is what I expect after Hey Stupid. And
Right.
it is a lot heavier. And there is an important drummer that's playing on this album,
Who's that?
Eric Singer.
But this, really? Wasn't he
Do you
busy with
not do
Kiss
your
at that
research?
time?
Go look up Brutal Planet. It'll tell you who's playing drums.
Okay, let me look here. because I thought that around this time that Eric Singer was busy with Kiss.
You had to remember when they brought him back to put him in Peter Chris's makeup. This is the time where they brought Peter Chris back in the hopes they get Ace Frehley back. So Eric Singer got to work. So he worked with Alice Cooper. He doesn't leave Alice Cooper until 2003.
Whoa.
Yeah. So there's another album that Eric Singer is going to be playing drums on with Alice Cooper. So this is his stunt with Alice Cooper. There was even a period of time that he was kind of Alice Cooper and with Kiss. And there's a live concert where Alice Cooper calls him the Kitty. Again, Alice Cooper takes people in and lets them go whenever they got to go. Again, his I don't want to say revolving door, but it's Alice Cooper and backup band.
Just real quick, you gotta think, what is it like to be Eric Singer, to be able to say, oh yeah, I've been drummer for Black Sabbath, I've been drummer for Badlands, I've been drummer for Kiss, and I've been drummer for Alice Cooper.
Before Kiss, he was on the Cult. He helped record Sonic Temple. They made that one of their biggest hits. That was Eric Singer playing drums there. So he's been around quite a lot.
Yeah.
So, but I will tell you, I love this album. I wish this album would have been slotted where Last Temptation was. This is another album for me that I could listen from start to finish, and it does not bother me at all. For me, it's perfect. As close to perfect as can be. But Brutal Planet is one of my all-time favorite Alice Cooper songs. Well written, well played. I don't know who produced this guy. Who was the producer?
Bob Ezrin. It was Bob Ezrin.
No, I don't think this was Bob Ezrin.
I looked it up. It is Bob Ezrin.
No, because right here it says here another guy.
Wait, hold on.
Bob Marlette.
Okay, here. So I'm looking at Wikipedia, which take it with a grain of salt. Bob Marlette produced it, but the executive producer was Bob Ezrin.
They'll never fall for that trick, Paul. Executive producer just means like an executive producer on a movie. They're not there on set. They're not directing. They're not in what would be equivalent in the studio. He's getting something sent to him and say, okay, do it or no.
Okay.
When you go by the producer, that's the best thing. Now, Bob Ezrin listed there as like a songwriter and probably did have some influence, but the main producer is him. And I'll be honest, even if I don't think, I'm going to be honest, it doesn't sound like anything Bob Ezrin would do. If you listen to anything that he's done, this is more, if you would tell me somebody had a hand in this behind the scenes, I would say more Rob Zombie than Bob Ezrin. And he's not listed on anything in here because the way that this album is, it's a great album. Magnificent. And you can definitely tell he's got the influence from Rob Zombie.
Agreed.
So
for me, this album, Brutal Planets, came out in 2000. I forgot to mention that, by the way. So it came out in 2000. I give it an 8 out of 10. I do think it's very much better than Last Temptation. I don't think it's as good as, of course, the 4 that is Constrictor, Raise Your Fist, Trash, and Hey Stupid. But it is still very good. It's just that, at least from the little bit that I've heard, industrial metal just really isn't my cup of tea. But again, Alice does it very well, and I can respect and even get into a little bit. So would I spend my money on it? Yes. And that, but again, that's kind of a weak yes for me. Like, I will buy other albums before I buy this one, but I will buy it. And my favorite song is the song Gimme, where
Uh,
apparently in the music video for that, he was ripping off boy bands.
but I would say for me, Brutal Planet. Brutal Planet. I'm definitely like the title track. And I will have to say what's coming up, and I have to say this. I don't know what Alice Cooper and maybe different record companies he's involved in, but you went from before Brutal Planet, a greatest hits album, and here you are doing right after Brutal Planet another greatest hits album.
To
And
include the
he's not the
songs
only
with,
one at this time that's done it, because in a period of time between uh 97 and early 2000s, Kiss released so many greatest hits albums where before you might have had two or three.
yeah.
They must have released about five or six.
Oh,
But
real quick, that just reminded me. I wanted to let you know that the other day Virginia actually picked up a vinyl, the two disc vinyl of Double Platinum for me.
yeah, that's one of their best, uh, if you want to call greatest hits. But
Hmm.
Alice Cooper, for some reason, like I said, Fistful of Alice '97 is pretty. That's the greatest hits album.
Which real quick, that one has re-recordings of "School's Out," "Billion Dollar Babies," and "Feed My Frankenstein" with Rob Zombie on it in
Yeah.
Rob Zombie's style.
Okay. But then then he does Brutal Planet, and then he does this one, um, Monster, the best of Alice Cooper. So now you're doing in a period of 97, 4 years, two out of your three albums are greatest hits. Now that could have been done because of the new label he was with,
Hmm.
because the previous one with Brutal Planet is Spitfire, and then it moved over to Rhino Records. That could have been the
Yeah,
reason why. But then he goes right back to Spitfire, which, like I said, I don't understand it. But for me, that's too much in a short period of time doing a quote unquote greatest hits album. I would
yeah,
tell people if you want to get one of the two or none, it's fine. But if you were to get a greatest hits album, I would lean, because it's different, because he has some remakes with different people, old tracks, but different people playing on it. I would lead toward the Last Temptation of Alice, because it's when you have different people playing on it, Rob Zombie, Sammy Hagar, you know, Slash, you're
hmm,
getting something different. All right, it isn't just the greatest hit. It's not just I'm 18 or School's Out when you got Rob Zombie and Sammy Hagar singing with it. Uh, this one, this greatest hits, the best of Alice Cooper. It's just tracks that's been remastered. I
right.
would go with if I was to get one, I would go with the first one, Last Temptation. This one, not so much. The
So
only
real quick,
way,
real
sorry,
quick, I want to cut in here and acknowledge Lee. Thank you for joining us. He says the four you named, the four you mentioned, Alice needed radio-friendly music, which it was, and he accomplished. Put him on the mat again. Hey Stupid is my least favorite except Wind Up Toy. So just just to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, Lee, you're talking about Constrictor, Raise Your Fist, Trash, and Hey Stupid. You're saying that Hey Stupid is your least favorite of those four? Because I definitely agree with that. To me, Constrictor is the best. But Wind Up Toy is a great song. I would probably say it takes second place for me as far as best song on that album. But again, thank you for joining in, and I'm sorry to cut you off, Phil.
no, it's no problem. Uh, I'll disagree with that. I love Hey Stupid. Even don't get me wrong, I love Constrictor and Raise Your Fist, but if I was to order it, it'd be Trash, Hey Stupid, uh, Raise Your Fist, and then Constrictor. But you can't go wrong with any of them four albums.
Oh, not at all.
And I would like to throw Brutal Planet at the end because I love that album. Start to finish, I love that album. And I love the next album we're getting ready to talk about.
Yes, which is the last album we're going to talk about tonight. This one came out in 2001 and it's called Dragon Town. And if anything, this is a continuation of what Alice Cooper was doing on Brutal Planet because it's still industrial metal, not quite as heavy as Brutal Planet, but still very heavy, and a lot of really great songs on here. And so for me, I also give this one an 8 out of 10. And there was a lot of songs that I could have picked on this one as far as which is the best, but narrowing it down to one. Actually, before I say that, before I say what my pick is, I do want to mention I think this is another loose concept album. Again, okay. So go back to the last part. And I said that I actually really liked Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, while you, Phil, said that you weren't so hot on that. I'm saying this to say that I think this album, Dragon Town, is what Alice Cooper is basically Alice Cooper Goes to Hell done better. Would you agree?
I could see that. And I'll give him a little more props because Alice Cooper is producing this. He's co-producing it, which is something you never had before.
Right.
Okay.
The last time that Alice Cooper produced an album himself was, unfortunately, Zipper Catches Skin, where he was clearly out of his mind on God knows what. But here, he is of a completely sound mind, and we get an amazing album for it. So, like I said, there's a lot of songs on this album that I could have chosen as my favorites, but the one that I chose is about someone that me and Phil have argued whether or not he actually passed away. My favorite song on this album is Disgraceland. But I gotta also highlight I Just Want to Be God and Sister Sarah.
Sister
too.
Sarah is my favorite. I do like this album. It's a nice follow up to Brutal Planet, just not as good as Brutal Planet. Sometimes, even at your best effort, you're not gonna. Where Brutal Planet for me is a home run, this is a triple. That's
I
the best way that I can say about it.
agree.
I
I gave this one also an 8 out of 10, but put this one up against Brutal Planet. I'm going Brutal Planet every day of the week.
And Alice Cooper has always been a Elvis Presley fan, so it's not a surprise for me at any time that Alice Cooper goes that route. Just for me, like I said, this is a good album. Not as good as Brutal Planet, but for me, if I can put two CDs together, I can listen to Brutal Planet and Dragon Town right afterwards. No problems.
In fact, I think Alice might have been best served because these are both great albums on their own. But I think the best thing that Alice Cooper could have done is release them both together as like a double album.
You always run that type of style that people have tried it and it has succeeded as doing that.
Like The Wall, for example.
Yeah. But I would say it's not it. He needed a follow up. And sometimes, no matter what you do, a follow up is never going to be as good as, say, the original. If you want to call Brutal Planet the original. But, like I said, besides The Last Temptation of Alice for me, and putting aside the greatest hits, regardless if it's the first one, Last Temptation, or not Last Temptation, but the two let's call them greatest hits. That's the best way. Uh, they're hit or miss. But even going further, Alice Cooper's back. He's on track. He may not be getting gold and platinum because let's just say at this time of the music industry, it's hard to get even a gold album.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's not for look, Alice Cooper's putting albums out. At this point, he's not putting them out to get gold and platinum records.
He's
If
doing
he's
it. Yeah,
doing anything, he's putting an album out so that way he can go on tour.
right.
And
And I want to
that's what all at this day and age, all music people are doing. The album is not as important as the tour. Where
right.
80s and the 70s and maybe even the early 90s, the album is the more important than the tour. So, you've seen it come different, it's flipped. You know, I mean, we can see this with anybody. You can put anybody in place of Alice Cooper. This, from 95 on, you're not seeing people make gold records. You're not seeing people getting platinum albums. Does it still happen? Yes. But in this day and age, it's not. The
Hey,
main purpose.
real
Sorry, go
quick,
ahead.
Phil. Look who just popped in the chats.
Do I want to know?
Hey, Cash, what's up, man? I'm doing perfectly fine, man.
Have you heard that Tuesday Night Track is back, baby? It's back.
In a way, it's back. But getting back on topic, one thing that we've kind of glossed over also, and this is going to be my kind of closing point for the night. One of the things that we kind of glossed over is that we're just talking about the albums. I just want to give everyone a reminder. Alice Cooper's true selling point. You've already talked about it a little bit, Phil. He makes these albums to do his tours. Alice Cooper's true selling point is what he's doing on stage with all of the different shock rock tricks out there that he's doing, whether it's the guillotine, whether it's the snake, or some of the new tricks he added, like say around the constrictor raise your fist and yell, where he is impaling someone with a mic stand. And he really ramps those tricks up on the Brutal Planet and Dragon Town tour. So it's of course always important to highlight that with Alice, that the albums may be good, some of them great, some of them influential, but his true selling points was what he's doing on stage, correct?
Pretty much, like I said, there was a term they called it in the 70s, shock rock. And Alice Cooper, you would say as an individual, since it became from the band to the man, he is the king of shock rock. And the other point to make on that, as far as band, you would say Kiss shock rock. Now, I hate doing the categories because would you say Kiss is only shock rock or Alice
Oh
Cooper
no.
only shock rock? No.
No.
Excuse me. But Alice Cooper today, and like I said, from going back to 86 with Constrictor, this is the Alice Cooper that we know. That period that's between Welcome to My Nightmare and Constrictor, best thing you can do, in my opinion, unless you're again a diehard Alice Cooper fan, and they don't believe it or not, they're out there. That's got to have every record. I can understand it, but
Well, he is not a Kiss fan. Give New York Dolls in the 70s, he says.
well, not everybody can like everybody.
Yeah, that's
Believe
valid.
it or not, I do like some things about Led Zeppelin. I'm not a Led Zeppelin fan. I'm a Deep Purple fan.
Mm-hmm.
And this might be, I know a lot of people are fans of the classic Mark II lineup. My favorite lineup is Mark III, Mark IV, with David Coverdale and
Glenn
Glenn
Hughes.
Hughes.
Yeah.
Not that I don't like the Mark II or the Mark One lineup.
Yeah.
But
Here's the thing. For me, there's always something good, at least for the most part. There's always something good in everything you don't like, whether you're willing to admit it or not. I've kind of realized that myself with some of the past albums that we covered before on this show, like the Black Sabbath retrospective, for example. I now own every single album on my phone here, when initially there was some I wouldn't touch, but I went back and listened to them. I went back and re-listened to Born Again, Headless Cross, and I have yet to re-listen to The Devil You Know in 13, but they're on there. I used to hate Headless Cross because I thought it was too satanic for what Black Sabbath was doing, and I listen to it now, and I don't know what I heard the first time around, but I didn't hear that this time. But I say that to say, basically, as an example, it's rare, not impossible, but rare that something is completely irredeemable.
Mm.
There's always something good in even the crappiest product.
Now I'm not as old as Lee's here. 63. He's got a couple years on me, but I know Alice Cooper fans, and I know a lot that were diehards and still to this day diehards. But I know some people that do not like Alice Cooper, the solo man. They prefer Alice Cooper, the band. Believe it or
another example. Another example. A lot of people stopped listening. A lot of people will not touch any Black Sabbath album that doesn't have Ozzy on it. My cousin being one of them.
Believe it or not, growing up as a kid, ACDC fans, if they didn't have Bon Scott on the albums, they didn't like Brian Johnson.
Or another example,
Yep.
a lot of people won't touch Kiss unless it's got the original four members in the makeup.
Yep. I mean, even to this day, you have people with Kisses longer, and
Mhm.
they love the unmasked version where Kiss isn't wearing any makeup.
Right.
And then you have, like you said, the original band, and there's other ones that love. Oh, believe it or not, when Benny Vincent's there. And then there's the diehards. And I would say when it comes to that, Kiss has the biggest diehards. Alice
Mm-hmm.
Cooper does have diehard fans, but I would say majority of his fans are, oh, I like trash. Won't go to or listen to another Alice Cooper album till probably
Ooh,
say Brutal Planet. You know,
Darren
uh,
just brought up a good one here.
oh, that was
Van
Brutal.
Halen or
Yeah,
Van Hagar or even Van Sharon.
no, we won't even talk about that guy. Don't talk about that. Doesn't exist, Paul.
All right, fine, but still, Van Halen versus Van Hagar.
I like both. And I will slightly say, since I listened to Van Halen when they first came out, I'll lean more to the David Lee Roth. But I would say that is a totally almost new and great band with Sammy Hagar there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, couldn't go wrong either way. I still think, and I'm going to get it. A Van Halen diehard probably is going to get mad at me. 5150 is probably their best album. Excuse me. 1984 is great, but I will take 5150 over there. You know,
Right.
again, even with Alice Cooper, it's all choice of what you like and what you don't like. But I don't think anybody can say they're an Alice Cooper diehard fan, and except for them, say I like that period between Welcome to My Nightmare and Constrictor.
I'll put it to you this way, and this is from Alice's own words. He has had people say that the four Blackout period albums are their favorites. And you know what? That's completely valid of them. If that is the sound that they like, if that is the music style that they like, okay. Yeah, I mean, you're probably never going to hear your songs played live because Alice Cooper doesn't know them. I mean, that's again his own words.
Well,
But yeah, if
sometimes some bands, when they have that dark period, I know people, Aerosmith fans, probably have less, probably popular more than Alice Cooper and Kiss,
Mhm.
but I'd say they will have less diehard fans than either one of them. But for
Yes.
those that are out there, there are Aerosmith fans. Name me an album between 1980 and 1985 that is an Aerosmith album that you have.
Real quick,
Very few,
Lee
none.
Lee brought up that he does like the blackout period. Again, great man. I'll be honest, I didn't, but he likes Zippers, Catch a Spin, Special Forces, and his favorite is Flush the Fashion.
But we
Good on
found
good on you, man.
we found a thing in a jar. That's all I can say.
Yeah, like here's the thing. To me, those albums, even though I don't like them and ranked them low, there's still aspects of them that I like. For example, the backing band on Zipper Catches Skin, and really all of them. And Flush the Fashion did have a few good songs on it, like Pain and Clones. It's just for me, my favorite of the Blackout albums is Dada.
I think Lee might be a diehard Alice Cooper fan and
Yeah,
probably has all the albums.
yeah,
I'm guessing.
he said he's a hardcore fan since
Okay.
11, which again, good on you, man.
And like I said, there's a lot of diehard Alice Cooper fans, not to the scale of a Kiss, not to
Yeah,
the scale of like other bands, but there are a lot. Okay. And like I said, they got to have every Alice Cooper album.
mm-hmm.
I'm an Alice Cooper fan, but I'm not a diehard. And for me, I could skip over anything between Welcome My Nightmare and Constrictor. And there's some things, even, you know, the two greatest hits albums, you want to call them that, I would take them over any of them albums in between there. But for me, I can't look. I remember that age with Alice Cooper when he wasn't that great. You know, uh,
Yeah.
for
I
me, I image look for me. Alice Cooper, after the band became the man, what you see on Welcome to My Nightmare and that Alice Cooper $1 billion babies, that's Alice Cooper for me. And I got that back when Constrictor came out. That's why for me, Constrictor, it makes it more that better because it's Alice Cooper back. You know,
right.
I don't want to see Alice Cooper doing new wave or anything. Just as much, I'm a diehard Kiss fan,
Mm-hmm.
and I struggle at times to listen to the disco. I just think it's painful. Not only that, I don't like Kiss Carnival of Souls. I have the album, I can listen to it. It's a good album, but it's not a good Kiss album. And I don't like it when Kiss tries to imitate what's going on in the genre that day. Kiss
Yeah, great.
grunge is awful, you know.
Yeah.
But like I said, if there, I know Kiss fans that love Carnival of Souls. I know Kiss fans that love The Elder.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if I wasn't a diehard Kiss fan, them three albums would definitely not be in my collection. You know,
Yeah.
it's all depending on you. Is it you, the person that is a diehard fan that's got to have every record? Then I can understand it.
I
But if
guess
you,
by that logic, Phil, since I now own every Black Sabbath record, I'm a diehard.
there you go. If you got every Black Sabbath album, then you are a diehard. And there's nothing wrong with being a diehard.
Mm-hmm.
But vast majority of people's fans are not diehards, except for a band like Kiss. Well,
Right.
I would say the ratio of Kiss is 40% diehards and people that will own 5 or 6 albums, let's say.
Yeah.
Where Alice Cooper, it might be 30% diehards and 70%, no, I like this album, but I don't like that album. All right. Now, I'm not picking on Alice Cooper saying 30% of diehards is bad. Aerosmith, as big as they are, I don't know an Aerosmith diehard that has every single Aerosmith album. There's probably one or two out there. They have to be. But I'm saying, as their fandom, I doubt you could say 20% is saying, I got to have everything Aerosmith.
Right. Real
No.
quick, Lee said, I liked Ronnie with Black Sabbath. Me too. In fact, I'm going to say it that Ronnie James Dio is the single best singer that Sabbath ever had. However, my top three favorite Sabbath albums all had Ozzy on them, those being Master of Reality, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and Sabotage. No particular order either with those. I will rotate through all three as to which one's my favorites. But I agree. Ronnie James Dio with Sabbath was amazing. And by the way, just a quick PSA since we're talking about Sabbath, all of the Tony Martin albums from Headless Cross to Forbidden got re-released recently, re-released and remixed. So if you missed those, go listen to them now, especially now that they've been remastered. They sound absolutely amazing. But with that, we are going to go ahead and bring this stream to a close. I am going to actually hold on. I am going to highlight one more comment. Blizzardhawk Darren says there's people that love Metallica but don't like their albums since the Black Album. That is unfortunately true. And here's the thing.
I would even say I like Metallica. I lean more towards Megadeth, which at one point it was the opposite. And Justice for All with no bass on there, I still don't understand what happened for. Yeah, but I would say for me, Metallica for me after the Black Album, no, I don't like Reloaded, or whatever else is after it.
Saint
No.
Anger is just
And it's nothing.
Saint Anger is a meme at this point.
And it has nothing to do with the bass player replacing Jason Newsted or Jason Newsted replacing
Cliff Burton.
Has nothing to do with it. What it has to do is, I think they went commercial after the Black Album, and I can remember even for Injustice for All, there was a time when Metallica would not do MTV. And then when they did Injustice for All of a sudden MTV blew them up. I liked that Metallica that didn't need to go on MTV. You know.
Yes.
But like I said, it's not just Alice Cooper. It's not just any band or any musician. There's always a period of decline. And some cases, like Alice Cooper, recovery. Same for Kiss, same for Aerosmith. It happens. Some of them albums that are in that period of decline, people question, do I really need to get these albums? Again, diehard fans have to have it. Yes. Casual fans, like I said, these are the people that might have 2 or 3 albums or a greatest hits in one album. All right, call them a casual fan. They don't need to have that period. That'd definitely be a waste of money for them. But if you're a diehard Alice Cooper fan, and I know a few, hey, give me that record. Give me the re-release of that record. Give me a demo of that record. There's nothing wrong with that. That's all personal choice.
It's all in basically, can you afford it?
Yeah. For me, like I said, I'm a casual fan, and I will say I like Alice Cooper. If the album's good, I'm buying it. If it's not, like I said, for me, them 6 albums there, can't do it. I can't do it. But love Alice Cooper. And give him credit, he's still going today.
He is.
And he can still sing. Maybe not as great as he was, Paul, but give him credit. He doesn't use backing tracks. He doesn't do any of that. Does he have more background singers helping him out? Sure.
Yes.
But he is still doing it today live. And let's be honest, he's sounding good.
He does.
And let's be honest, the next albums we're going into after this, or part 3, I guess we're doing.
Yes.
So great albums. Great albums.
So speaking of part 3, let's go ahead and schedule that for 2 weeks from today, Monday the 24th. I can't do the 17th because I've got something important going on that day. So Monday the 24th is when we will do part 3. And that will be from The Eyes of Alice Cooper to basically his most recent album, Road. Other things that are coming up, Phil was kind of alluding to this earlier, but for those that are new around here, one of the things that was really consistent around my channel in the beginning was Tuesday Night Trek, where myself and some other people, Phil was one of them, we were reviewing the different Star Trek shows, and for reasons that we don't really need to get into, that show kind of fell away. But a version of it is coming back tomorrow through Beginner Series, where myself and Baron are going to be talking about the different Star Trek books that came out. So basically, the Star Wars EU, there's also the Star Trek EU, and we're going to get into that.
Tuesday Night Trek is back, baby.
And Phil cannot wait. But yeah, that's what's going to go on then. And I think Friday we're going to bring back the discussion streams. Obviously, we're not doing open panels anymore. That is done forever. But I'm going to reach out to a few friends coming up cuz I have an idea for a discussion that I want to have. The topic will be, is the book truly better than the movie? And is that a fair comparison to make? So I'll be reaching out to, we'll say, 4 different people to have that panel with me, and we will have that discussion very soon. Let me just real quick check my calendar and make sure I don't have any plans. I've started investing in an online calendar. Okay, so yeah, this coming Friday, we're going to actually, no, not this coming Friday, next Friday. So that will be Friday the 21st. We're going to bring back the discussion panels, and that's going to be our topic. Is the book truly better than the movie? So a lot of good stuff coming up soon. I will not be doing any more streams, though, after tomorrow because I've got a test I need to study for. That's going to be Monday the 17th, so pray for me. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. And just remember, everyone, long live Alice Cooper, long live rock and roll, and the Force is family.
Tuesday Night Trek is back, baby.
See you later.